We're here on another episode of the Growth League podcast. I'm here with my guest, Jillian Frechette. She's the CMO of the New Jersey Devils, Prudential, and among others. Jillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. This is great.
Give us a small understanding, sort of an executive summary of your journey as a marketing leader, and where do you sit today? What's your mandate today?
You want the journey first or the mandate?
The journey first.
The journey first. Okay. Well, I am Canadian, but of course I make my home in New Jersey now, so there's a bit of a story behind the story. I cut my teeth in beer. I graduated and spent time with Molson Brewery and then later Labatt Brewery. And I think what was so fundamental about spending time in the beer world is that beer always touches something sporty.
Right.
There's always some kind of sports sponsorship or partnership with a brewery and perhaps a league or a team or some kind of event. And really the beer just gave me that sense, I think, as to what like a game day might look like later. Like there's nothing quite like the energy of an event day.
Yep.
And there's truly nothing quite like the energy of an actual game day once you sort of enter the world of professional sports. I spent some time with Nike Canada in Toronto. So really got into sneakers and good stuff like that. And then had the opportunity to relocate to Calgary with my husband. And so we came west. And I worked for Saucony for just over a year.
Okay.
They were Boston based. And I was here in Calgary working from home. And I think the trick was it was long before, Zoom or Teams or anything else. It was just conference calls. Yeah. And I felt a little bit isolated. I was flying to Boston for 1 week out of every month. And I was on all these different conference calls, and I felt a little bit isolated. And I got really tired of those conference calls, Can you hear me? Are you there? Can you hear me
classic,
now? Are you there? So I had the opportunity to talk to the Calgary Flames and come in and take over their digital portfolio. And then eventually I took over their marketing portfolio, which brought with it, creative services and a bunch of other things. And I spent 5 years with Calgary. And they were really formative years for Calgary because that's really truly when the Flames were sort of establishing what's now Calgary Sports and Entertainment. Mm-hmm. So my marketing portfolio was fabulous. It was the Flames, it was the Stampeders, part of the CFL, it was the Roughnecks, it was the Hitmen, two junior teams in the United States that I had the opportunity to work on rebranding and uniforms. And of course, great venues, Saddle Dome and McMahon Stadium. I left the Flames after about a 5-year window, and I was working on Calgary 2026, which is, you now know, it's a failed bid. And I'm still mad.
Not for lack of effort.
Not for lack of effort. I really was passionate about that project, and quite honestly, it was a hard decision. I was working on the bid, and the New Jersey Devils were starting to recruit me to come to New Jersey, and it was a really sort of wacky time personally and professionally. And I eventually sort of made the decision with my husband, and we would go to New Jersey. We'd relocate. And so that's what we did towards the end of 2018 for me and my baby son. He was about 4 months at the time. We hiked it to New Jersey, and my husband was here in Calgary for about 6 more months with my big kid. And then eventually we all four made our home in New Jersey. And I'm going into my 7th season with the Devils.
Taking all of our players.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We've got Dougie, we've got Curtis, we had Toffoli for a little while, Markstrom. My portfolio is interesting. It's always changing. The mainstays are the Devils and Prudential Center, but certainly as Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment grows, certain brands and venues fall sort of into my purview. We've got a small venue in Jersey City called White Eagle Hall, which is a really fun spot. We've got a small, beautiful theater being restored right now in Jersey City called Lowe's, which is part of my portfolio. I have worked on Woolman Rink, which is in New York City.
Woolman Rink.
Yeah,
okay.
It's an iconic rink. You've probably seen it in movies, but our organization took over operations for that a few years ago. So there's a bunch of digital and marketing work that needed to be done there. And then the entertainment space is really growing. So it's hockey, but it's also entertainment, and entertainment is lots of things. It's concerts, it's Disney on Ice, it's lots of things. Equally in our building, we're home to Seton Hall men's basketball. So from a production perspective, my squad's working on that. And really exciting, this year we're gonna host the majority of the games for a PWHL team, the New York Sirens.
Oh, really?
So last year we had 2 games that we helped with, and this year they're gonna call Prudential Center home for 13 of their games.
That's amazing. And that league is just taking off too.
Yeah, women's hockey. Yeah. I'm really excited about it.
What calls you and fulfills you about this profession, about this line of work, about the opportunity to build and work with team? Why do you keep coming back?
On the team side, I think I'm really fortunate. My squad, so, the team that ladders up through the marketing portfolio, there's a lot of different stuff going on. There's marketing, there's digital marketing, there's production, so actually producing games and concerts. There's content, there's social media, youth hockey and growth initiatives, community investment. So for me, the reason I feel so fortunate is, every day of the week I'm challenged and charged with thinking about lots of different things because all these sub-departments are so vastly different.
Yeah.
Youth hockey growth initiatives, community investment, those two really sort of like hit the heart. Yeah. I'm really passionate about stuff in the community. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of my other marketing responsibilities and production responsibilities, but those two, I really love when we do something in the community that has impact.
From your perspective, what are one or two things that maybe others wouldn't fully understand or be aware of as it relates to major challenges that modern day CMOs face today?
Well, the landscape is changing. It's not always easy to be a CMO, and sometimes CMOs have a hard time with buy-in and, retention of their own job, potentially.
Interesting.
Marketing's really fun, but we have big obligations, and those obligations tie back to revenue. In my case, they tie back to revenue. They tie back to tech. There's a lot of tech in my portfolio that I'm responsible for because of the venue. And, the revenue piece is really big. Yeah. So you have to be flexible. You've got to be strategic. You've got to be really focused. And you really, truly have to connect the dots between the initiative that you're sort of conceptualizing and the outcome. And the outcome has to have dollars and cents attached to it.
Yeah. So it's building this business case. And in pursuit of getting support and buy-in, what are some of the ways that you've found successful in co-creating with leadership? People support what they help create, and it's not always straight line to convince them we need to do this. But what's been your approach in playing the game of facilitating an understanding and a co-creation? That's a
great question. I think for me, I'm not a gal that really thrives on one-offs. For me, I always want to think about what is the master strategy, and maybe what are the smaller strategies that live underneath that master strategy. And with the Devils, when I showed up in late 2018, the team was a bit of a mess on the ice, and the brand was a little bit vanilla. And so we started in those formative years, probably the first 24 months, doing a ton of research and figuring out how we could really sort of resonate with folks that lived in New Jersey, find those hockey fans, find those emerging hockey fans, but more than that, launch a sort of a master brand strategy, a brand identity campaign. And that sounds very marketing and brandy, but it's truly the umbrella that drives all of the different mini campaigns that we execute in a given year, and all of those tie back to an ROI in some form or fashion. Yeah. But without that umbrella, without that North Star, we would have a really hard time. So I think for me, with my peers, with my superiors, I've always been really passionate about making sure that we had that North Star and making sure that things sort of strategically made sense and laddered up to that North Star. Right. And then more than that, making sure that each of those tentacles, if you will, tie back to dollars and cents in some way.
Have you seen that approach bode well for members of your team that want to know that the work they're doing on a day-to-day has some linear relationship to something that matters from an outcome standpoint? Or have you found that hasn't created the motivation and the vision that I'm talking about now? How critical is having that North Star?
Well, it's everything. And, my team was really sort of participatory and certainly neck deep crafting that North Star initially. So you have buy-in when someone feels like they're part of something.
Totally.
And now, there is sort of, there's a comfort almost in creating a family of brands that live underneath that same strategy or that same North Star, because it just starts to make more sense. Right. It's easier to know what you're saying yes to or no to when you're making business decisions when you've got the North Star. Yep. If you don't, it gets harder and there's gray area. So I think my team appreciates the fact that they were part of it. They all had a role in the band or a part to play, but they know and understand where they're going, and that really is helpful when you're trying to unify a team, particularly a diverse team that has lots of different sort of responsibilities and skill sets.
How often do you find yourself allocating people and effort and time across the portfolio? Is there an equal distribution by default, or do you find yourself having to sort of maestro that?
It really depends what's going on, what time of year it is. People, I'm really fortunate. I've got a great team, but people, they are the single biggest driver of what's going to dictate your week.
Yeah.
And when things are going really well, you need to be invested and you need to spend time with your squad. Equally, when things are starting to go sideways, you need to be invested and you need to spend time with your squad. So I've got regular touch points, but then I make decisions based on what's happening and really who needs me or where I can be of value and of support and service. And sometimes the kicker with being a leader is you lean in a little bit, and it's not so much about like lending your expertise as it is being like supportive and enabling those folks to make good decisions and get through whatever the challenges they need to get through.
Yeah. What would you be comfortable admitting is your superpower as a marketing leader?
Oh,
something that you rely on all the time because you know it's just old hat, it feels good, I guess others would say that it is a superpower.
That's a great question. I think that I do well with people. I'm really fortunate to have great people on my team, but equally we've nurtured some great relationships. So I think that, there's a reciprocal piece there. Yep. So I feel fortunate, but a lot of the folks that I recruited when I started with the Devils in 2018, 2019 are still with me. Some of them are Canadian. Yeah. I may or may not have poached some folks from the Oilers. And then I think the other piece is that I'm really committed to sort of that master strategy, and I just have a gut feel about certain things, and I can sniff things out if I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole. And so I think that that is helpful to my team sometimes because when they're really in it, and it's sometimes hard to have clarity, and I really can usually help them and sort of get things back on track to make sure that we're just sort of all pulling in the right direction. And that sounds really cliche, or maybe that doesn't make sense at all, but those are the two things that I think I add value as a leader. It's the people piece, being in tune with my squad, and then it's sort of like the reset piece. If we need it, whatever that the word is, sort of retooling or fine-tuning and getting back on track to the master strategy.
On that topic, one of the most common challenges I hear amongst marketing leaders is not only finding A players or hiring them, training them, managing them, but retention is a big problem right now. Marketers believe the grass is always greener.
Yeah, I know.
So tell me about that.
Well, retention's really tricky for lots of reasons. One, sports and entertainment, the schedule is not pretty.
Okay.
So if you are very committed to work-life balance, sports and entertainment is a tough nut. So that can be hard with retention. We demand a lot, and we have weird and wacky hours. Yeah. I've got a production team that quite often travels with the hockey team, and they're getting ready actually to in a week or so to go on a long, lengthy Western Canadian road trip.
Oh, nice! So they'll be out here.
Yeah, they will. But and they love it, but it's a little bit, right? If you've got a spouse at home or kids, like it's certainly a commitment to take off for 7, 8, 9, 10 days and be gone. So that can be a problem with retention. Marketers, I think the other issue is that in New Jersey, we live in the shadow of New York. It's a very populous state. Mm-hmm. There's 9 million people in New Jersey alone. And I think there's just lots of opportunities. Yeah. And in sports and entertainment, there's lots of competition. We are the only team in New Jersey to proudly call ourselves, New Jersey, and wear that on our crest. But we have what I call lots of squatters. New York Jets and New York Giants, the Red Bulls, several other teams practice and play in New Jersey, but have New York in their team. Oh. So from a fan base perspective and cultivating, nurturing new fans, that's a hot mess. But equally from a retention problem, there, sometimes there's a videographer who thinks the grass might be greener with the Jets, and they can just stroll down the street. Oh. So it's a little bit different, I would say, where there is a bit more competition. That retention, you have to be mindful of it.
That makes sense. And I guess it's part of your job, as a leader, is to cultivate a strong enough culture so that it creates a bit of stickiness, right? It's not as easy just to walk down to the Jets. It's like, I'm part of this family type thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I want I want my staff to feel comfortable. I want them to feel motivated and encouraged. I want them to feel a sense of accomplishment. And I'm always mindful of that. But I'm also a person that will celebrate every once in a while a resignation, and not because I'm happy to see the person go,
growing.
but because they've got a great opportunity. And I sort of believe that there's a bit of a shelf life for some of us, myself included, at different opportunities that I've had in the past. And when someone has the opportunity to take on something new or different or bigger, I'm going to be their cheerleader.
That's amazing. What would you be okay and willing to admit is an area of weakness as a marketing leader for yourself? Maybe not weakness, but something you're very enthusiastic about improving and looking at.
Well, I probably have a long list. I'll give you a couple. Sometimes I'm too in the weeds. So I have to sometimes like step out of it. And it's not so much a micromanager piece. It's just more that I'm in it. Like I'm in it a little too deep. So sometimes I have to remind myself that even though some of these projects and initiatives are super fun, it's actually not my role to be neck deep. That's one piece that I have to be mindful of, and I have to have a small little talk with myself every once in a while. I think the other piece is that me personally and professionally, I have a hard time turning things off.
Okay.
And I'm pretty invested, and I love what I do, but the downside is I'm not always the best at like figuring out when to turn it off, when to recharge my batteries, and I have to remind myself, and equally I have to sort of listen in with my spouse when he's kind of had enough of my work crazy.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 little kids, and I'm unfortunately married to a great guy. So the family setup is really in a great spot, but I need to be present sometimes, and it's hard
It's a struggle, and it's not your fault, right? When we attach ourselves to brands of meaning and teams of meaning, that becomes not a work-life balance thing, but it becomes part of our life. And so it's not your fault, and it's very common, but I think it's awareness and looking at our kids. I have young kids too, and I'm guilty of the same thing, right? It's like, where does that time come in? So
yeah, you need to put your phone in jail. I think there needs to be a jail.
I've been doing that lately. I get home, I just keep it in the truck, and then when they go to bed, I fish it back out.
Okay, that's good. Maybe I'll try that. I don't have a truck, but maybe I'll try that.
For you and the group of companies and group of brands, you'll always be in a scenario where you're working with agencies and contractors and your current team. What's been your approach in facilitating as healthy and positive of a marriage as possible between this idea of external and internal? How do you create unification of go-to-market? One team, one dream, when there's an external, internal component.
So just to clarify, you mean external, like agencies, partners and freelancers?
Like non-full-time employees.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? We have a funny setup. And it's... I would call us maybe a bit of a hybrid. And so we have full-time marketers for sure that work for New Jersey Devils Prudential Center and a few other brands. And then we definitely have different vendors and agencies that we work with. And I think that with those vendors and agencies, what you put into it is really important, like being fair and clear and taking the time to develop briefs and expectations and, pretty frequent communication. All of that is hugely important. And I make sure that that's something that we do a good job of, because I hate hearing just negative talk about maybe one vendor and then hearing later that we weren't clear with that vendor, or we didn't really, engage with that vendor the same way we might have engaged with someone else. So I think the investment of sort of time and communication and information with an agency vendor is critical. And then the other piece is we have a lot of freelancers. And some of them are just part of our Devils family. Folks might be interested to know that essentially our creative director lives here in Calgary, Alberta. Really? He works in his basement, and he worked closely with me at the Calgary Flames and the Calgary Stampeders. His name is Ian, and he's fabulous. I'm not going to tell you his last name because you can't steal him. But he's been on the Devils brand for the last 6 years, and he's really embedded into sort of my team. I think people forget that he doesn't have a business card just like the rest of them. He comes every year for a home opener. He spends time hours on Teams throughout the week. And he's really sort of interwoven or integrated, however you want to say, into the fabric of my team. I have another strategist, Vanessa, who lives here in Langdon, Alberta.
Okay.
And she's really sort of integrated into my team as well. So we're all about just figuring out the right talent and the right people, and we're less about worrying in my portfolio about whether or not that person has a full-time gig or maybe they're more sort of project driven.
Does that North Star that you talked about earlier help create the unification? So you're internal, you're external, but we're all
well, we worked on it together.
There you go.
So that's a biggie. And then, one of the biggest sort of initiatives to sort of put our fans on notice that our big Made in Jersey brand identity campaign was here to stay, was a black jersey that we launched. It was the first third jersey or alternate jersey for the New Jersey Devils in about 40 years. And so that project, all of us, the full-timers and the contractors and different agency partners worked on it. So it was a unifier. Yeah, for sure it was. And there's a lot of great sort of stories behind that jersey and the launch and the piece and the role that it played with our fandom. But it was a unifier.
Cool. That's cool. I want to ask one more question about you more personally. Then I would like to know a little bit more about this brand and why you believe that it has a special place in the hearts and minds of folks in East Rutherford, right? Is that where you are? Is that, or where?
We're in Newark.
Okay, you're in New York.
So New Jersey Devils practice and play in Newark. Previously, they were in the Meadowlands for many, many years, but Prudential Center was built and opened in 2007, and so we've called Newark home for quite some time.
So I'm curious about this. Besides reports and data and the things you put together to represent sort of the quantitative impact that marketing's having, how do you personally, say you're driving home at the end of a day, what do you rely on in your gut to be able to tell yourself, I made impact today, I did a good job today? Is there anything that's not found on a report that you rely on?
Well, I mean, immediately I sort of rely on my inner circle, on my team. Okay. And when we were developing this brand identity campaign, which is now called Made in Jersey, we really looked at what Detroit had done with Hockey Town, and we looked at what Minnesota had done with State of Hockey, and we even looked north of the border with what the Raptors had done with We the North, and we were like, look, we want to invest in something that we're going to commit to for the longer term. And so we did research, and we had metrics and data and all sorts of things coming every which way at us. But one of the most important sort of pieces or threads through that process was a handful of people on my marketing team that are through and through New Jersey. Okay. They're born in New Jersey and they're raised in New Jersey, and they truly were the sniff test at certain forks in the road when we were making decisions about is this a thing? Is this the right thing? Yeah. Left or right? Which way? Yeah. I feel like a Jersey girl living there, but I know that I'm a bit of an imposter because I'm passionately Canadian, and I'll always be that way. So I rely really heavily. I have an Alex, I have a Michael, I have an Allison. I could make a longer list. And some of those people are on the marketing team. And then we've got people on different squads, like the corporate partnerships team or maybe hockey ops. Yep. But if they're sort of born and bred in New Jersey and we're sort of facing a decision that really, truly requires sort of authenticity and it needs to be meaningful and it needs to just be spot on, it's kind of like that inside focus group that I rely on.
Yeah, the sniff test. I love that. How often do you find yourself, if at all, chatting with the Catherine Dobbs of the world or other marketing leaders across other competitive brands? Is there any of that going on? Is there a community?
Yeah, I mean, you got, I'll tell you the good stuff. Catherine and I are great friends. She's the CMO of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and we've become great friends probably in the last 2 to 3 years. And so we text a lot. Okay. Equally, I've developed a great relationship with the CMO for the NHL. Her name's Heidi Browning. I was just texting her earlier. She's lovely. So there's lots of sort of like casual conversations or casual texting going on, but more than that, Heidi and then certainly Brian Jennings that you saw today, they're great about sort of formally putting together what they call like the Marketing Leadership Council. So the CMOs in the NHL, they meet probably 3 or 4 times a year in a city and get together and hash through like a 1 or 2 day kind of like workshop or conference, sort of tackling how we're going to plan for something, how we're going to deal with something, sharing insights of what worked in what market, what was
you
a
guys
complete.
talk about that stuff.
Yeah, we talk about it. There are NHL meetings that happen once a year, usually in the summer. They're called Club Business. So we usually meet then as well.
Okay.
So we do, it's funny because we're competitors on the ice, but there's quite a few of us that are good colleagues. I've got a great pal in the CMO for the Ducks, Merritt. So sometimes he's my sniff test for hockey stuff, but we do talk back and forth, and I think it's just a relationship piece.
That's awesome. Tell me about the Devils brand now. Like, how is it? How is this thing going to evolve and grow and deepen itself into the community? What's the next 10 years look like in your perspective for the Devils?
Well, that's a great question. When I came to New Jersey, there was a lot of sort of seasonal stories that had been in and out of market, and like a garbage pail of hashtags that had been in and out of market. And there was really no stickiness or consistency. So we really committed to figuring out how we would develop the right thing for the longer term. Quite honestly, when I came to New Jersey, I knew I had 2 problems. I had to build a brand or sort of reinvigorate a brand, but equally I had to sort of build a following and an audience and figure out how to grow sort of engagement and fandom and followers and all that stuff.
Was it just dead? Sorry to interrupt. Was it like you're painting this picture of it was on life support almost?
Well, our team was really in tough shape.
Okay.
And hockey teams are cyclical. They go through this. Yeah. And so we had an aging team on the ice. We were trying to unload some expensive contracts. We had some young guys, but we were having a very hard time. How I can measure this, there's lots of ways of sort of looking back, but in my first year on the job, we finished 29th in digital rankings for the NHL. The NHL measures all kinds of stuff, websites, apps, social. We were 29. This past spring, in March, we finished number 2.
Wow.
And that was a huge commitment to building a content team, driving a social strategy, launching a brand identity campaign. Then, this massive jersey that has just been like life-changing for our brand. So it was just really a team in transition. The Devils, we celebrated 40 years about 2 years ago. So when I came into town, we were, 37 or 38. And it was just a tricky time because there were 3 Stanley Cups in the rearview mirror, which is fabulous. But they were just at that point where it was like, oh, it's a rebuild. Okay. And it was a brand rebuild and a team on the ice rebuild. And they sort of happened neck and neck. And that actually worked out well.
Wow. So your team to see this massive growth from 29th or whatever to 2nd, that's a shared victory, I guess.
Yeah. We do it in collaboration with Hockey Ops. Yeah. You have to have access to players to tell stories. Equally, you need to think about sort of that sweaty hockey coverage and then balance that out with some more sort of like lifestyle coverage and peek behind the scenes. So we're constantly reevaluating like the stories that we're telling, the coverage that we offer, and the conversation that we have with fans because, social platforms are essentially a pipeline to your fans. And so we look at those sort of conversations or those exchanges is really critically important.
I have a question about a tactical campaign, I think probably initiated by the NHL, but how does something like the mask off thing, this, trying to get the personalities behind the mask to the forefront, does that get communicated from the NHL and then the Devils need to find their way of sort of mobilizing more relatability with players?
Yeah, there's dozens of initiatives that happen in a calendar year that the NHL cooks up and launches. Yeah. And sometimes those initiatives come with a lot of direction and tools, assets. Other times might be a little on the lighter side. Mm-hmm. But no matter what, I think to be successful as a team, you need to take what the league is doing and really sort of like prop it up and amplify it in your own way. Yeah. And we found that to be true in partnership with the NHL and Adidas. We launched 2 reverse retro jerseys, and we certainly were happy about the jersey and the assets and some of the photography and whatever else that the league was offering in collaboration with Adidas. But we knew to like really make it stick, we had to sort of jerseyfy it and amplify it and make it make sense to our fan base. So I think when the league does something, you need to just take a peek at it and be like, cool, how is this going to make sense in our market? How are we going to tap a player? How are we going to resonate with our fans? What do we do? What's our responsibility here? If you think that you're going to get something from the NHL and just sort of fling it out there and hope for the best, I don't think
And they want you to put your Newark spin on it.
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So this event, we're at the Gathering. Tell me about it for you. What does it mean for you? And I don't know if this is how many times you've been coming, or
I'm a little bit of a Gathering junkie. This is my 11th year. The Gathering has happened 11 years, and I have come every year. I've known Chris and Ryan from Cult, and certainly their colleagues that are part of Cult for a really long time. I've hired them as an agency multiple times, and I consider them, good friends. The Gathering in year one was it's just kind of funny to think back. It was really small. You can fact check me, but I think there were 250 or 275 guests, and now it's north of 1,500
standing
conference
room only.
Conference delegates. It was a different time for me. At the time, I was with the Flames, and I think the first year that I came, my daughter was 1, and now she's 12. I used to blow in from Calgary and drive the hour plus to get to Banff, and now it's a bit of a haul.
Yeah.
We fly from New Jersey to Calgary and then figure out how to get from Calgary to Banff. But I think this event has been a terrific event for many years because there's just some really great people. There's great people that keep coming, so it's always fabulous to see familiar faces and just sort of like connect with those folks. But equally, there's new people that come. And so I've made friends with a lot of people over the years, and some of those folks own agencies, and we've established sort of a professional relationship. 3 or 4 years ago, we connected with an agency called Areto, and we still use them. They're great. There's probably other examples that I can think of from an agency perspective. But probably the biggest one, quite honestly, is like a connection that I made in year one at the Gathering. He's the reason I'm in New Jersey.
Really?
So
all these things happen.
It's a funny path, and it's a bit of a loaded question to ask me that because there's a bit of nostalgia, sort of personally and professionally. And if you've not had the chance to visit the Gathering, I would encourage it because I think it's really, really meaningful. Every year I bring a bit of an entourage. This year I've got 4 or 5 people with me. Several years ago, I think I had as many as 9. Our sister company is the Philadelphia 76ers, so sometimes there's a few basketball humans that have come out. Notably, Chris Heck, the former president of the Sixers, was here a few years ago. Scott O'Neill, our former CEO at HBSE, was here as a speaker a couple of years ago. So it's just a really nice reunion when I'm able to come, but it's a big sort of learning opportunity as well.
That's great. Here's my last question for you. This is for a message for the marketing coordinators, the managers, and the directors of the world that have put on their vision board leading a marketing function at CMO or the VP level. What are some of the things that you might share with them for this stage of their career? What should they be thinking about? What are some of the tracks they can be laying for themselves if that is their ambition to be a CMO?
Gosh, okay, well, that's a good question. This is not where I thought I would be, but here's what I tell my team. And I've got, junior employees, middle managers, senior directors, and VPs. One of my passion points is that I always want for us to maintain sort of a sense of curiosity or a natural curiosity. And that can take shape in many ways for different people. But I want to know that my team is doing a ton of reading. I want to know that they're listening to podcasts. I want to know that they're phoning a friend. I want to know that they actually connect with people in other industries. I think that's really important. Sometimes in sports, we sort of sit in this little silo of sweaty. Yeah. And it's some of the biggest lessons that I've learned or some of the biggest sort of key insights that I've gleaned have come from someone that works in an entirely different industry. But the root of all of that, those conversations, those books, those podcasts, it all goes back to being curious. And if you can sort of just always maintain that sense of curiosity, and always sort of want to be that person that questions a few things, I think that can serve you well as you think about coordinator to manager, manager to director, director to VP. It's never being stale and it's never being stagnant. It's always about sort of asking questions and learning.
I love that. Jillian, thank you so much for spending this time with me and sharing how you're playing this game. The great game of marketing leadership.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.